used to work nights at a small-town cemetery just outside of Rainier Falls, Washington. Population, barely 2,000. The kind of place where people wave when they drive past, and gossip spreads faster than wildfire. The cemetery sat at the end of a winding dirt road, tucked between a patch of pine woods and a dried-up creek. The locals called it Hollow Grove, though nobody really remembered why. It was old, older than the town itself, and on foggy nights, it looked more like a field of ghosts than graves. I took the job out of desperation, really. My wife had left, the bills were stacking, and after a string of factory layoffs, digging graves didn't seem that bad. Quiet work, no drama. But Hollow Grove was different. The first few nights were normal enough. I'd clock in at dusk, drive the small maintenance truck down the gravel path, and start patching up headstones or clearing debris from the storms. I didn't mind the silence. But by my second week, I started noticing things. Sometimes I'd find fresh footprints near old, forgotten graves, deep ones, like someone had been standing there for hours. Other times, tools I'd left leaning on the shed wall would be lying in the middle of the grass the next morning. Once I found my shovel sticking upright in the ground beside an open grave that had already been filled the day before. The dirt looked freshly turned. I thought it was a prank, maybe kids sneaking in, until one night I realized the lock on the main gate was still sealed. The worst night started late October. Fog so thick I couldn't see my own boots. The whole cemetery was drenched in that eerie quiet. Not peaceful, just wrong. The caretaker, old man Barlow, had called in sick. I was the only one on shift. He told me earlier that week to keep clear of the north lot, the oldest section. Said the ground there was unstable after last month's rain. But that night, as I made my rounds, my flashlight flickered and died right near that section. I could see only the faint outlines of crooked headstones through the fog. That's when I heard it. A dull thud, like something heavy hitting wood. I followed the sound to the far edge of the north lot, where the trees pressed in close. The ground dipped slightly, and there, under a dead maple tree, was a collapsed grave. The earth had caved in, forming a shallow pit. And at the bottom, half buried in mud, was a coffin lid. I sighed, muttering, "Not again," and went back to the truck for my shovel. But when I came back, the hole was deeper, and there were finger marks in the mud. Long, thin grooves dragging upward from the coffin. My stomach twisted. I thought maybe an animal had gotten in. Raccoons, coyotes, who knows? But when I knelt closer, the air turned bitter cold. I could see my breath, even though it wasn't freezing out. Then I saw something that made me step back. A nameplate, rusted, half sunken in the dirt. It read, Samuel Rains, 1983 to 2023. That was my name. I froze. For a good 30 seconds, I couldn't move or think, just stared at my own name on that corroded plaque. It didn't make sense. I wasn't dead. This had to be some kind of sick joke. But I hadn't told anyone at work my full name, just Sam. No one knew my birthday. No one knew where I was from. And yet, the dates were right. And the current year. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a broken headstone. My flashlight rolled down into the pit, its beam landing on the coffin lid below. That's when it started to move. At first it was subtle, like the shifting of wet earth. Then louder, a creaking noise. And finally, knocking. Slow, deliberate, from the inside. I backed away fast, my boots slipping in the mud, my heart pounding so loud it drowned everything else. Then came the voice, soft, muffled, but undeniably real. "Help me, Sam." That broke me. I turned and ran, sprinted all the way back to the maintenance shed, locked myself in, hands shaking. I grabbed the old rotary phone on the wall and tried to call Barlow. But the line was dead. Not static, not noise, just silence. And then, beneath the silence, I heard faint breathing, slow, right in my ear. I slammed the phone down. I waited until dawn inside that shed, clutching my shovel like it would protect me. When sunlight finally broke through the fog, I forced myself back to the north lot. The hole was gone, the ground perfectly level as if nothing had ever been disturbed. My flashlight was still there, lying on the grass. Its light was off, but when I picked it up, I noticed something carved into the handle. A single word. Soon. I quit the job that afternoon, packed my things, told Barlow I couldn't handle the night shifts anymore. He didn't ask why, just nodded like he already knew. Before I left, he said something I'll never forget. "You saw it, didn't you? The north lot." I didn't answer. He sighed, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. "That's why I told you to stay away from there. The graves don't always keep what's theirs." That was 6 months ago. I haven't gone near Hollow Grove since. But 2 weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, of the cemetery. And in the bottom right corner, half hidden in fog, was a fresh grave marker. The name carved into it was mine. Again. But this time, the date of death wasn't 2023. It was next week. I used to think cemeteries were peaceful, quiet, empty spaces where the world stood still for a while. That changed after I took a night security job at Rose Hill Memorial Park, just outside St. Cloud, Minnesota. It was a sprawling graveyard, over 100 acres of marble, iron fences, and whispering pines. At night, it felt endless. The paths wound between graves like veins, vanishing into the dark. My shift ran from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Easy work, I thought. Drive the golf cart, keep an eye on the cameras, make sure no teenagers snuck in. But Rose Hill wasn't just old, it was alive in a way that defied sense. My third night, I was parked by the west gate, drinking cold coffee and scrolling my phone. The air was still, no wind, no sound, when I heard something faint over the hum of the cart. A whisper. Too soft to make out words. At first I thought it was a trick of the wind, but it didn't fade, it grew clearer. And it wasn't one voice, it was many, dozens, murmuring just beneath the surface of the ground. I stepped out, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam over the graves nearby. Nothing, just rows of crosses and headstones gleaming pale under the moonlight. Then my light caught something strange, a patch of disturbed earth near an old family plot. The name etched on the nearest stone read, "The Cartwrights." The soil there looked freshly turned, even though the graves dated back to the 1800s. And when I crouched closer, I realized the whispering wasn't fading. It was coming from there. A low, rhythmic chant. Soft, desperate, almost like praying. I backed away, trying to convince myself it was just groundwater or air pockets or something natural. But then one of the voices changed. It rose above the rest.
A woman's voice, hoarse, frantic. "Help me. Please, let me out." My blood ran cold. I stood frozen, staring at the mound of dirt as it began to shift. Tiny cracks formed in the soil, pebbles rolled down. The ground trembled slightly, not like an earthquake, more like something pressing upward. That's when the cross tilted, then fell. I ran, jumped back into the golf cart, and tore down the gravel path towards the main office. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the radio when I tried to call for backup, but there was only static. I stopped halfway down the main lane when my headlights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed everything, and then the whispers returned. Only this time, they were closer, right behind me. I turned, slowly, and standing there, in the middle of the path, was a woman. She looked soaked, hair plastered to her face, dirt caked along her arms and dress. Her skin had that pale, washed-out color, like she'd been lying in cold water too long. She was barefoot. Her eyes were open wide, but clouded, gray, unfocused. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't coming from her mouth. It was coming from beneath the ground. "He buried us wrong." What? "He buried us facing up." Before I could react, the soil behind her began to shift again. Dozens of patches of earth shifting, cracking open. The sound was wet, muffled. Then came the smell, that thick, sweet rot of something long dead. Hands, pale, skeletal, and slick with mud, began pushing through the soil all around me, fingers clutching at the air, at the grass, at my boots. One grabbed my ankle. I screamed and kicked free, bolting towards the chapel in the center of the cemetery. Inside, I slammed the doors and jammed a broom through the handles. My flashlight flickered weakly as I stumbled through the pews, breath coming in short gasps. The chapel was empty, or it should have been, but the whispering had followed me. It seeped through the walls, the floorboards. I dropped to my knees, pressing my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. If anything, it grew louder. Hundreds of voices, crying, pleading, chanting in overlapping waves. Then one voice cut through them all, the same woman's voice from before. "Look behind you." I turned, and in the middle aisle, all the candles had lit themselves. Every one of them burned with a faint blue flame, and standing at the altar was the same woman, her head tilted slightly, her neck bent at an impossible angle. She smiled, not kindly. "He made us face the sky so we could watch." "Watch what?" I whispered. "You." The flames flared bright white, and every window in the chapel shattered at once. When I woke, it was morning. The chapel was in perfect condition. No broken glass, no candles, no dirt. My radio was on the pew beside me, quietly hissing static. I stumbled outside, blinking against the daylight. The graves were undisturbed, the crosses all upright. But the ground where the Cartwright plot had been disturbed before was smooth, almost freshly leveled, and sticking out of the soil was a single wooden cross. No names, no dates, just one word carved on the surface. Watcher. I quit the next day, but every now and then when I close my eyes at night, I can still hear them. Those whispers rising up from the earth, begging, praying, warning. And I know, deep down, they're still facing the sky, waiting for someone else to watch.
I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town that most people wouldn't recognize on a map. You know the kind, one gas station, a diner that closed too early, and a cemetery that was older than anything else around. It sat right on the edge of town, behind the line of oak trees that turned blood red every fall. As kids, we used to dare each other to hop the fence and touch one of the old gravestones, but I never did. Something about that place, it just didn't feel right. Not spooky exactly, just watchful. Like the dead there weren't resting at all. Fast forward 15 years. I had just come back home after my father's funeral. He was buried in that same graveyard, Evergreen Hill Cemetery. It was a quiet service. My mom stood there crying into a tissue while the pastor droned on about peace and eternal rest. But I couldn't shake this weird thought. Evergreen Hill didn't look peaceful anymore. The grass was dying, the air felt heavy, and near the far edge I noticed one grave that looked wrong. It wasn't my father's. It was an older one tucked behind a half-rotted tree. The headstone leaned at an angle, cracked right down the middle, and the earth around it looked freshly disturbed, as if someone had dug it up and then filled it back in. A week later, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every night, I dreamed of dirt shifting, of whispers just below the ground. I'd wake up with soil under my nails, no clue how it got there. So one night I did something stupid. I went back. It was a little after midnight. The gate was unlocked, it always was. Fog rolled in off the hills, wrapping the gravestones in this soft, ghostly haze. I walked toward that tilted headstone, my phone flashlight slicing through the mist. The air felt colder the closer I got, like stepping into a refrigerator. And then I saw it. That grave, the same one I'd noticed before, was now wide open. A gaping hole, 6 feet deep, no mound of dirt, no shovel marks, just a hollow space and an old wooden coffin sitting inside. My heart started pounding. Part of me wanted to turn and leave, but another part, that stupid human curiosity, kept me there. I leaned over the edge, aiming my light down. The coffin was cracked along one side, and it was empty. No bones, no body. Just torn fabric and a faint rotting smell. Then something shifted inside the coffin. A shadow, quick and small. I jerked back, thinking it might be a rat. But rats don't whisper your name. Ethan. My name! The sound came from below, like it was echoing through a tunnel. I froze. Then slowly, the whisper came again. You shouldn't have come back. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, my flashlight tumbling into the grave. It landed beam up, lighting the coffin from below, and that's when I saw it. Handprints, dozens of them, pressed into the inside of the coffin lid, each one smeared, as if whoever had been buried there had clawed at it for hours before dying. Then came a sound that made my stomach twist, a low creak. The coffin shifted. No wind, no movement from me, but the lid began to rise inch by inch until it hung open like a mouth. And inside, something moved. It wasn't a person. Not really. It looked human once, but the skin was gray, stretched thin like paper, and the eyes were missing entirely, just black hollows that seemed to absorb the light. The smell hit me next, like soil and decay, and something damp that had been left too long in the dark. It climbed out slowly, deliberately, like it wasn't in any rush. Every movement creaked, every joint cracked, and when it stood, it tilted its head toward me, as if trying to remember me. You buried me wrong, it rasped. That same phrase from my dreams. Who are you? I whispered. It took a slow, shuddering step forward. You put me back when I wasn't done. I turned and ran. Didn't think, didn't breathe.
The fog was so thick I could barely see 2 feet ahead, but I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. When I looked back, the fog had swallowed the graveyard entirely. Just silence. And then faintly, under the rustle of the trees, I heard that voice again. "You'll finish what you started." The next morning, I called the town caretaker. I told him one of the graves had been dug up. He went to check and called me back an hour later. "You sure you weren't dreaming, kid? That grave's sealed tight, been that way for decades." I drove back there myself later that week, just to see. And he was right. The ground was untouched. No open pit, no broken coffin, but the headstone had changed. The old name was gone, worn smooth, and in its place, carved crudely into the stone, were 3 new words. "I remember you." That night I dreamed I was underground. The air was thick. I couldn't move. And above me, faint, muffled, I could hear shovels scraping dirt. Someone whispering my name. I woke up gasping, hands pressed against my sheets like I was trying to push something heavy off my chest. When I looked down, there was dirt under my nails again. Same as before. And now, I don't go near Evergreen Hill anymore, but sometimes, late at night, when the wind is right, I swear I can still smell the earth, freshly turned, waiting